Welcome to Ask Angela, relationship advice for love after trauma. I'm Angela Amias, here to help you navigate intimate relationships as I answer real questions about love, loss, and everything in between. This is where we untangle old patterns that keep us stuck and discover new possibilities for connection. Relationships after trauma need a different kind of wisdom, and I'm so glad you're here. What do you do when you know you need to have a difficult conversation with your partner, but you have no idea how to talk about it, or even how to bring it up? Having difficult conversations in an intimate relationship requires courage, and this is particularly true when it comes to talking about money, which can be a very charged topic for so many couples. In this episode, I'll be answering a question from Ramon, who writes, I grew up in a family where there was very little discussion about hot button issues. Sex, money, religion, you name it, it just wasn't talked about. As an adult, I understand that my parents had no clue how to talk about things. Even now, they're both very conflict avoidant. None of that helps me in my own marriage, where my husband and I have completely different ways of dealing with money. He doesn't ever worry about money. He spends, and I stress. I've noticed that the more he spends, the more anxious I get about how we're going to meet our financial obligations every month. It doesn't help that I'm an artist and he's a financial advisor, so he makes a lot more money than I do. I don't feel like I can splurge on big vacations every time he feels like getting away, but I don't want to tell him no either, so I end up feeling even more stressed. I have no idea how to talk to him about this. Every time I think about saying something, I freeze. I know I need to figure this out, but I have no clue where to start. Dear Ramon, navigating difficult conversations skillfully takes a lot of practice. This is as true for money conversations as it is for other topics that can be sensitive, emotional, or connected to family ideas about how things are supposed to be done. Money is consistently named as one of the top 5 sources of conflict for couples. And yet, like sex, another topic in the top 5, conflicts about money aren't just about money. Money is closely tied to deeper values like freedom, safety, autonomy, fairness, responsibility, and trust. At the societal level, money is often considered to be something you don't talk about in polite company, which can make learning how to talk about it tricky, even within the context of our intimate relationships. Add to this that many people have internalized money as a symbol for worth and value, so that how much money we have is an implicit reflection of our value, which can lead to discomfort, shame, and embarrassment when there's a significant income disparity within a couple. With all that said, of course, avoiding conversations about money is a recipe for relational disaster. At the same time, how we talk about money really matters. The reality is that there's no one right way to approach money, and each of us has our own unique money style. So many of the money experts out there promote their own personal money style as the one right way to do money, which doesn't help couples who are having to navigate the reality of having 2 different and equally valid ways of making money decisions. Even apart from the reality of income disparity in your relationship, it's also possible, even likely, that you and your husband have different money styles. So now that we've established a framework for thinking about money and the need to acknowledge partners' different money styles, Let's talk about the overarching issue of what you learned about addressing difficult topics when you were growing up and how that's affecting you now. You write that your parents avoided and still avoid talking about any hot button issues, including money. This means that not only did you not have a chance to learn how to have these kinds of conversations when you were growing up, it also means that during childhood you probably internalized an association between fear and certain emotionally charged topics. In essence, you may freeze when you think about talking about money because this kind of conversation feels forbidden, like something you're not supposed to talk about. It likely also feels like wading into very dangerous territory. After all, when you've never witnessed a couple work through a difficult talk about money, how that is done remains a complete unknown. While consciously you might know that talking about money is important, violating an internalized rule from childhood can make it feel like you're doing something wrong anyway, even when you know better. And when you don't know how to talk about it, freezing up when you even think about opening up a conversation makes sense. But obviously, not talking about it isn't going to work. That's because right now you're experiencing a situation in your relationship that's really common when partners avoid addressing sources of underlying tension or difference. As your partner spends money freely, you're aware of becoming more and more stressed about finances. In other words, your feelings about money in your relationship are becoming stronger even as they aren't expressed openly. It might even be the case that the more money your partner spends, the less able you are to spend money because you feel responsible for compensating for your husband's spending. Trying to create financial balance by not spending yourself is likely to lead to feelings of resentment over time, when it seems like you're the only one carrying the burden of financial stress in your relationship. If this is the case, it means that the lack of discussion around money is starting to create a wedge in your relationship, where you and your husband are growing apart even as the issue itself hasn't been openly addressed. Oftentimes, when pressure and stress and resentment build up, it ends up being released in an unexpected way. Let's imagine that one day your husband buys yet another $10 flat white at your neighborhood cafe, and all your financial stress suddenly spills out. Maybe it takes the form of a critical remark or a flash of frustration. Or maybe you say something that provides enough of a spark to set off an explosive argument that shakes the foundations of your marriage. The reality is that conflict avoidance is really hard to maintain over time because those unaddressed feelings bubbling away inside you are always looking for some way to get out. Unfortunately, when a couple's approach to conflict vacillates between avoidance and destructive hostility, it further convinces avoidant partners that conflict is dangerous and really should be avoided whenever possible. So, given that you don't want to continue avoiding the money conversation, and I'm sure you also don't want to have an unproductive or destructive conflict, what can you do instead? In order to address your tendency to freeze, the first thing you're going to need to do is get clarity for yourself about what you would like to say to your partner. When you have no experience having difficult conversations, it's a recipe for disaster, or freezing up, to expect that somehow the right words are just going to come to you in the moment when you want to talk. The right words aren't going to come on their own because you've already internalized the family rule to never talk about difficult topics like money. You're going to need space and time to figure out what it is that you want to communicate to your husband about money, about this dynamic in your relationship, and about the intensifying financial stress you're experiencing. Instead of expecting yourself to be able to have these kinds of conversations spontaneously, start by gaining insight into your pattern of conflict avoidance around money. Ask yourself, what did I learn about money growing up? And what am I afraid might happen if I address money directly with my partner? Having more clarity around your fears, both related to conflict in your relationship and specifically about money, will help prepare you for having a conversation with your spouse. You'll know exactly what those underlying fears are, which can then help you think about what might make it feel safer for you to start working on this together with your husband. Next, it's important to also gain clarity about what you're hoping to communicate to your partner when you bring this up with him. Ask yourself questions like, what do I want my partner to know about my experience with money in our relationship? What are my concerns about money? Moving forward, when it comes to money, what do I need in our relationship? When I'm working with someone with a long history of conflict avoidance and the tendency to freeze up during hard conversations, I always encourage them to write down exactly what they want to communicate. One of the things that nearly always accompanies feeling frozen is having our minds go blank. We might be very clear about what it is we want to say beforehand, but once we're face to face with our partner, it's very easy to lose track of what we'd hoped to convey, either because we forget everything we planned to say, or because the conversation goes off in a totally different direction. Think of it like preparing for a speech and write down your talking points. While it may not feel natural to reference what you've written down while you're talking with your partner, after the conversation is over, you will likely feel a sense of relief that you were able to get across most of what's been on your mind related to money. Lastly, it's really important to approach this as an ongoing series of conversations about money. This is not a one-and-done money talk. Instead, you're just opening the door to this topic by signaling to your partner that there's an issue here that needs some attention. This also means not approaching your conversation with the intent to solve the problem. Premature attempts to solve deep-seated relationship issues usually backfire because the couple hasn't spent enough time gaining clarity about the roots of the issues before trying to implement a solution. I'm adding this caution here because oftentimes conflict-avoidant couples will want to skip right to solving the problem as a way to avoid the messy middle of talking about hard, complicated feelings and gaining clarity about the problem in the process. Your money conversations are going to give you the chance to learn how to have difficult conversations productively in your relationship so that you develop the skills for addressing other issues that will inevitably arise in the future. My wish for you, Ramon, is that once you start having the hard talks you've avoided, you find that you have untapped potential for navigating challenges with skill and self-confidence, while also discovering that your marriage is sturdier and more resilient than you'd imagined. And on that note, listener, thanks for tuning in. That's it for this episode of Ask Angela, Relationship Advice for Love After Trauma. This podcast is really built around your questions. So if you've got a relationship situation that you'd like me to talk about, head on over to askangelapodcast.com to submit your question. I'll be back soon with another episode. And until then, lots of love.